The crystal towers of Zeph Prime burned against the black sky. Ambassador Veltara pressed her six-fingered hand against the cold viewport of her escape ship, watching her homeworld die. The Devourers had come 3 days ago, emerging from the darkness between stars like a plague of metal and hunger. Her ship shook as another explosion lit up the planet's surface. The ancient machines were methodical in their destruction, breaking down matter itself to feed their endless expansion. Cities that had stood for 10,000 years crumbled in minutes. The crystalline spires that once sang with the voices of her people now screamed as they shattered. "Ambassador, we must leave now," her pilot Krendor said, his voice tight with fear. "The orbital stations are falling. If we stay much longer, ... Veltara nodded, but couldn't look away. Somewhere down there, her children had been attending the Academy of Sciences. Her mate had been working in the great libraries, preserving their people's knowledge. She would never see them again. The ship's engines hummed to life, pulling them away from Zeth Prime's gravity well. Around them, hundreds of other escape vessels fled into space, carrying the last survivors of a civilization that had once spanned 12 worlds. Now only a few million Zephyrians remained, from a population that had numbered in the billions. As they reached safe distance, Veltara activated her communication array. She had been sending the same message for weeks now, broadcasting it to every known civilization in the galaxy. The words had become a ritual of desperation. "This is Ambassador Veltara of the Zephyrian Confederation. Our people face extinction. The Devourers consume everything in their path. We have lost 11 of our 12 worlds. We beg for assistance. We beg for sanctuary. We beg for hope." She had sent this plea to the hegemony first. They were the most advanced civilization in known space, masters of technology that seemed like magic. Their response had been swift and cold, analysis complete, intervention probability 0, resource expenditure exceeds strategic benefit. The hegemony will secure its borders. The Corvan Empire had been equally dismissive. Their massive war fleets could have crushed the Devourers, but their reply was brutally simple. "Corvan forces defend Corvan space only. Your conflict is not our concern." Even the Stellar Trade Union, who had profited from Zephyrian commerce for centuries, abandoned them. All trade routes in affected sectors are permanently suspended. The Union regrets this necessary decision. One by one, every major power in the galaxy had turned away. They sealed their borders, recalled their fleets, and watched from safety as an entire civilization died. The mathematics were simple to them. Saving the Zephyrians would cost resources and risk their own worlds. Better to let them perish and maintain the status quo. Veltara's ship drifted through the debris field that had once been Zeth Prime's orbital defense network. Broken stations and shattered warships floated like tombstones in space. Her people had fought bravely, but their weapons were designed for peacekeeping, not war against an enemy that consumed stars themselves. Her communication officer looked up from his station. "Ambassador, we're receiving responses to the latest transmission. Put them through," she said, though she already knew what they would contain. The first was from the Andromedon Collective. "The collective expresses sympathy for your situation, but cannot risk contamination by unknown technology." The Voidwalkers were more direct. "Your species lacks strategic value. Adaptation requires sacrifice." The pattern continued for hours. Expressions of sympathy followed by excuses. Regrets followed by refusals. Some civilizations didn't even bother to reply. The galaxy's greatest powers watched the Zephyrian extinction with the same indifference they might show to the burning of a distant star. As her ship's fuel cells began to fail, Veltara made one final transmission. Her database showed one last entry, a small blue world in an unremarkable spiral arm. The inhabitants called themselves humans and had only recently achieved interstellar travel. By galactic standards, they were primitives with crude fusion drives and kinetic weapons. She almost deleted the entry. What could such a young species do that the great powers could not? Their entire fleet probably numbered in the hundreds, not the thousands. They had no advanced weapons, no reality-bending technology, no vast industrial complexes spanning multiple worlds. But as her life support systems flickered and failed, as the last hopes of her people died around her, Vel found herself composing a message to Earth anyway. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps some deeper instinct told her that advancement wasn't always measured in technology alone. "This is Ambassador Veltara of the Zephyrian Confederation," she whispered into the communication array. "If anyone receives this message, please remember that we existed. Remember that we tried to live in peace. Remember that when we begged the galaxy for help, no one answered." The transmission fired into the void, carrying with it the final prayer of a dying race. Veltara closed her eyes as her ship's power failed, expecting nothing but darkness. She had no way of knowing that her message would reach a species that measured worth differently than the rest of the galaxy. A species that had never learned when to quit fighting. Admiral Han Su stood in the command center of Luna Base, staring at the alien transmission that had arrived 3 hours ago. The holographic display showed a 6-fingered being with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Even through the static and interference, he could hear the desperation in her voice. "Sir, we've cleaned up the audio as much as possible," Lieutenant Park Jin said, adjusting the controls. "The translation software is working, but some concepts don't translate well." Han watched the message again. The alien called herself Veltora, and her people were dying. Something called the Devourers was destroying entire worlds, and no one in the galaxy would help them. The major powers had all refused, citing cost and risk. "What do we know about these Devourers?" Han asked. Dr. Kim Jun stepped forward, tablet in hand. As Earth's leading expert on alien technology, he had been studying the fragments of data embedded in the transmission. "From what I can understand, they're ancient machines that consume matter to fuel their expansion. They've been dormant for millions of years but have recently awakened. And our military assessment?" Han turned to General O-Min, head of Earth's ground forces. "Honestly, sir, we're outmatched by galactic standards," O-Min replied bluntly. "Our fastest ships take months to cross what advanced civilizations cover in days. Our weapons are kinetic projectiles and basic energy beams. We have 800 ships total, and most are exploration vessels converted for defense." Han nodded grimly. Earth's military had been built for defending the solar system and protecting human colonies. They had never expected to fight ancient alien killing machines. The United Earth Defense Force was impressive by human standards, but laughably small compared to the galactic powers. "Sir," Communications Officer Lee So-young interrupted. "We're receiving priority transmission from Earth Council. They want your assessment for emergency session." 2 hours later, Han found himself in the Earth Council chambers in Geneva. Representatives from every nation and colony sat in the circular chamber, their faces grim as they watched Veltara's message for the 3rd time. "The question before us is simple," said Council President Wang Li. "Do we risk our own people to save aliens we've never met?" Councillor Patel from the Mars colonies spoke first. "We can barely defend ourselves. Our colonies are vulnerable. If these devourers come here after we interfere, millions of humans could die. But if we do nothing, an entire species dies for certain," countered Dr. Kim from the Observers section. "They're not asking us to fight their war alone. They're just asking someone to care." The debate raged for hours. Some argued that Earth should focus on its own defenses. Others pointed out that helping the Zephyrians might bring advanced technology to Earth. Still others worried about making enemies of powers that could destroy human civilization. Councillor Park Mina from the Asian Federation stood up. "I've been listening to all these arguments about strategy and resources and risk, but has anyone actually listened to that message? Really listened?" She activated the hologram again. Veltara's voice filled the chamber, raw with grief and desperation. Please remember that we existed. Remember that we tried to live in peace. Remember that when we begged the galaxy for help, no one answered. That could be us someday, Parkmina continued. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in our lifetimes, but someday Earth might face extinction. And when that day comes, wouldn't we want someone, anyone, to care enough to try? The chamber fell silent. Han watched the faces around him, seeing the internal struggle each representative faced. They were being asked to risk everything for strangers, to send their children into battle against an enemy they didn't understand. All in favor of authorizing military assistance, President Wong called. Hands rose slowly around the chamber. Han counted carefully, his heart pounding. The vote was close, incredibly close. 847 for, 823 against. Motion carries, Wong announced quietly. Admiral Han, you have authorization to mobilize Task Force Liberation. Within hours, Luna Base became a hive of activity. Every available ship was recalled from patrol duty. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers, though many were turned away. Earth simply didn't have enough ships for everyone who wanted to help. Han assembled his senior staff in the briefing room. I won't lie to you, he told them. This is probably a suicide mission. We're taking fusion-powered ships against technology that's millions of years old. Most of us won't come home. Captain Nam Gil raised his hand. Sir, what about our families, our colonies? Earth's orbital defenses will remain operational, Han replied. We're taking only volunteers, and we leave. Enough forces to defend the home system. But anyone who comes with us needs to understand we're fighting impossible odds. The preparation took 2 weeks. Engineers worked around the clock to upgrade weapon systems and install additional armor. Scientists studied every fragment of data from Veltara's transmission, trying to understand Zephyrian technology and devour capabilities. On the day of departure, Han stood on the bridge of the flagship Courage, watching Earth shrink in the viewport. Behind him, 799 other human ships prepared for the longest journey in their species' history. They found Veltara's ship drifting powerless near the outer edge of the system, life support failing. When the rescue team brought her aboard, she stared at the humans in confusion. I don't understand, she whispered through the translator. Why are you here? Your species has nothing to gain. Han smiled grimly. Maybe that's exactly why we're here. The journey to Zephyrian space took 6 weeks, and every day brought new discoveries. Dr. Kim Jun spent hours with Ambassador Veltara in the converted laboratory aboard the Courage, learning about her people's technology, the Zephyrian crystal. Matrices fascinated him, especially how they seemed to respond to thought patterns. Your neural implants are primitive by galactic standards, Veltara explained, her 6 fingers dancing over a crystalline control interface. But they might be compatible with our biocrystal networks. Most advanced species abandoned direct neural interfaces centuries ago. Chief Engineer Lee Hanna worked alongside Zephyrian refugees to retrofit human ships with salvaged alien technology. The shield generators were particularly challenging, requiring complete rewiring of power systems. It's like trying to put a fusion reactor in a steam engine, she muttered, wiping sweat from her forehead. The first real test came 3 weeks into their journey. Long-range sensors detected movement ahead, sleek shapes that didn't match any known ship design. Admiral Han called General Quarters as 6 Devourer scout vessels emerged from the darkness. All ships, Battle Formation Alpha, Han ordered. Remember, we're here to learn as much as fight. The enemy vessels were beautiful in a terrifying way, flowing curves of dark metal that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved with impossible grace, accelerating and turning in ways that should have torn any crew apart from gravitational forces. Captain Yoon He commanded the destroyer Thunder, leading the first attack run. His ship's railguns fired tungsten projectiles at the nearest scout, watching as the rounds struck true. For a moment, he thought they had scored a hit. Then the enemy armor began to change. The metal flowed like liquid, restructuring itself around the impact points. Within seconds, the same tungsten rounds bounced harmlessly off the adaptive surface. "What the hell?" Yunhei whispered. The Devourer's response was swift and devastating. A beam of coherent energy lanced out, cutting through Thunder's shields like paper. The destroyer's hull glowed white-hot before exploding in a brief star of light. 2 more human ships died in the next 5 minutes. Their weapons, designed to fight human opponents, proved useless against technology that learned and adapted faster than they could fire. The remaining ships retreated, but not before recording everything. Back on the Courage, the analysis began immediately. Captain Nam? Gill of the research vessel Discovery led the investigation, poring over sensor data with Dr. Kim and Val. "Their armor is reactive," Nam Gill reported to the assembled officers. "It analyzes incoming attacks and adapts its structure to counter them. After the first hit, it becomes immune to that specific weapon type." "How do you fight something like that?" asked Captain Lee Min from the cruiser Endurance. Dr. Kim looked up from his analysis. "We don't think like them. Look at this data. Their adaptation system is incredibly sophisticated, but it's designed to counter advanced galactic weapons. Energy beams, particle cannons, gravity manipulators, things we've never even built." He pulled up a holographic display showing the enemy armor's response patterns. "But look what happens when we use chemical explosives. The adaptation matrix struggles to process the chaotic energy release. It's like their system doesn't know how to categorize such a primitive attack method." Valterra's large eyes widened with understanding. "The Devourers are ancient. They've been fighting advanced civilizations for millions of years. They wouldn't expect anyone to use such basic weapons." Lee Hanna grinned from across the table. "You're saying our primitive technology might actually work better than advanced weapons?" "Exactly," Dr. Kim nodded. "Their systems are designed to counter predictable, organized attacks. But human weapons are chaotic, inefficient, and completely random by their standards." The next week was spent in frantic preparation. Engineers modified torpedo warheads with chemical explosives, creating weapons that were technically inferior, but strategically unpredictable. Kinetic weapons were recalibrated to fire at random intervals and frequencies. Dr. Kim made another breakthrough while studying Zephyrian neural interfaces. "I think I can create a feedback loop," he told Admiral Han excitedly. "If we channel human thought patterns through their crystal matrices, we might be able to overload Devourer systems." "Explain it in simple terms," Han requested. "Human brains are messy," Kim replied with a smile. "We think in patterns that don't follow logical algorithms. Emotions, intuition, random associations. If I can broadcast that chaos through Zephyrian crystals, it might crash their adaptive systems." The tests were promising. Human volunteers connected to crystal interfaces could create neural static that disrupted even basic computer systems. The effect was stronger when multiple humans worked together, their combined thoughts creating an incomprehensible pattern. Fighter pilot Lieutenant Choibin volunteered for the most dangerous experiment. His small ship was fitted with both Zephyrian crystals and chemical warheads, creating a hybrid weapon system that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. "It feels alive," he reported during test flights. "The crystal responds to my thoughts, but it's not controlling me. It's like having a conversation with the ship itself." As Task Force Liberation neared Zephyrian space, word of their approach spread through refugee networks. Valtara received messages from scattered survivors, voices filled with hope for the first time in months. "They don't believe it," she told Admiral Han. "They think humans are just another species that will abandon them when the fighting starts." Han looked out at the stars ahead, knowing that somewhere in that darkness waited an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. His small fleet of primitive ships seemed pathetically inadequate against such power. "Then I guess we'll have to prove them wrong," he said quietly. The Kepler's Dawn system blazed with fire and death. 50 massive Devourer harvest ships hung in space like dark monuments, each one the size of a human city. Around them swarmed hundreds of smaller fighters, sleek predators that moved through space with deadly grace. Below them, the last Zephyrian stronghold waited for extinction. Admiral Han Su stood on the bridge of the Courage, watching his sensor displays with grim determination. His fleet of 800 human ships looked tiny compared to the enemy force, like gnats, preparing to fight giants. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Kepler's Dawn," Communications Officer Lee So-young reported. "It's the planetary governor." The hologram showed an elderly Zephyrian, his crystalline features marked with exhaustion and despair. "Human ships, please retreat while you still can. We appreciate your courage, but this battle cannot be won. Save yourselves." Han stepped forward to respond. "Governor, this is Admiral Han of the Earth Defense Force. We didn't come this far just to watch you die. All ships, attack pattern Delta. Remember your training." The human fleet moved forward, in a loose formation that confused the Devourer sensors. Unlike the rigid battle lines favored by advanced civilizations, the humans spread out chaotically, each ship following slightly different approach vectors. Captain Namgil led the first wave in his converted research vessel. Discovery, his ship, launched a barrage of chemical explosive torpedoes at the nearest harvest ship. The ancient vessel's adaptive armor began to adjust, but the random energy patterns from the primitive explosives caused visible confusion in its defensive systems. "Direct hit," Namgil reported. "Their hull is actually taking damage." The victory was short-lived. Devourer fighters swarmed toward the human ships, their energy weapons cutting through space with lethal precision. The destroyer Lightning exploded. Under concentrated fire, its crew of 200 vaporized in an instant. But something strange was happening. The Devourer fighters, designed to counter predictable attack patterns, struggled against human pilots who relied on instinct rather than calculated maneuvers. Lieutenant Choi Ben rolled his fighter into an impossible spiral, avoiding 3 energy beams by pure reflex. "These humans fight like madmen," one surviving Zephyrian pilot observed over the communication network. "They make no tactical sense." That was exactly the point. Chief Engineer Lee Hanna led a boarding party onto a damaged Devourer fighter, using magnetic grapples to attach her assault shuttle to the enemy hull. Her team carried chemical explosives, plasma cutters, and simple kinetic weapons that the ancient machines couldn't properly analyze. "Remember, these things adapt to organized attacks," she told her squad as they cut through the hull. "So don't be organized. Be random. Be chaotic. Be human." The boarding action was brutal and confused. Devourer internal defenses tried to counter the human assault, but Lihanna's team moved in unpredictable patterns, splitting up and regrouping without any clear plan. They planted explosives in what looked like important systems and fought their way back to their shuttle. The fighter exploded from within, its adaptive systems unable to contain the random destruction. Dr. Kim Jun worked frantically in his laboratory, aboard the Courage, connected to a massive array of Zephyrian crystals. Around him, 20 human volunteers sat in meditation chairs, their neural implants linked to the crystal network. "Focus on chaos," he instructed them. "Think about everything at once. Childhood memories, mathematical equations, your favorite foods, your worst fears. Make it impossible for any logical system to process." The hybrid neural network began to broadcast. Across the battlefield, Devourer ships suddenly stopped coordinating their attacks. Their ancient communication systems, designed for perfect logical efficiency, couldn't handle the chaotic static of human thought patterns. A massive harvest ship near the planet's orbital stations began to drift, its engines shutting down as cascade failures spread through its computer networks. Captain Park Hyo led a strike force of 12 destroyers directly toward the disabled giant. "All ships, target the central hull section," Park ordered. Use everything we have. The concentrated bombardment of chemical explosives and kinetic rounds finally broke through the harvest ship's adaptive armor. The ancient vessel split apart in a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire system. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Devourer capital ship had been destroyed. The tide of battle began to turn. Human ships swarmed around the larger enemy vessels, their chaotic tactics preventing the Devourers from mounting coordinated defenses. Fighter pilot Lieutenant Jung Min led a squadron in what military historians would later call the most insane attack run in human history, flying directly through a harvest ship's energy beam array to plant explosives in its weapon systems. But victory came at a terrible cost. Admiral Han watched helplessly as enemy fire overwhelmed his flagship's shields. The Courage shuddered under impact after impact, its hull beginning to buckle. "Sir, we're losing life support on decks 3 through 7, reported his damage. "Control officer, engineering is gone. We can't maintain this much longer." Han looked at his tactical display, seeing the larger battle turning in humanity's favor. 3 more harvest ships were falling to combined human-Spherian attacks. The enemy formation was breaking apart. "All ships, this is Admiral Han," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Continue the attack. Don't stop fighting." He turned to his helm. "Officer, set collision course with that harvest ship. Full speed." The Courage accelerated toward the largest enemy vessel, its damaged engine screaming. Han stood on his bridge as the ship shook itself apart around him, watching the harvest ship grow larger in the viewport. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels. The harvest ship's ancient armor finally failed under the kinetic assault, and both ships disappeared in an expanding ball of plasma. Across the system, the remaining Devourer ships began to retreat. The galaxy celebrated. News of humanity's victory at Kepler's dawn spread faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks to every civilized world. For the first time in recorded history, someone had made the Devourers retreat. The impossible had become reality. Ambassador Veltara stood in the Earth Council chambers, watching representatives from dozens of species queue up to offer congratulations. The same civilizations that had ignored her people's desperate pleas now sent elaborate gifts and friendship treaties to Earth. "The hegemony offers exclusive technology sharing agreements," announced their ambassador, a tall being with silver skin and multiple eyes. "We are prepared to upgrade your fleet with our most advanced systems." The Corvin Empire's representative, a warrior caste alien covered in ceremonial scars, stepped forward next. "The Empire extends an invitation for Earth to join our military alliance. Your tactics have proven ... effective." Even the Stellar Trade Union, who had abandoned Zephyrian space without a second thought, now offered lucrative contracts and shipping deals. Everyone wanted to be friends with the species that had done what the great powers could not. Admiral Yunhei, who had taken command after Admiral Han's sacrifice, listened to the offers with a carefully neutral expression. Earth had lost half its fleet and thousands of brave volunteers, but suddenly the galaxy treated them as equals. "It's funny," she said to Dr. Kim Jun as they walked through the corridors of Luna Base. "When we were nobody, nobody cared. Now that we've proven we can fight, everyone wants to be our ally." Dr. Kim nodded grimly. He had spent the past month analyzing recovered Devourer technology, and what he found worried him deeply. "The ones we fought were just scouts. The main Devourer force is still out there, and they're not going to ignore us anymore." Deep in the void between galaxies, ancient sensors detected the destruction of their advanced forces. The collective intelligence known as the Devourers had slumbered for millions of years, awakening only when organic life became too numerous to ignore. They had faced many challenges before, watched entire civilizations rise and fall, but none had ever successfully destroyed their ships. The small blue world called Earth had changed that equation. Massive forms began to move in the darkness. Constructs the size of moons turning toward the spiral arm where humanity lived. The Devourers had patience beyond mortal understanding, but they also had pride. The species that had dared to challenge them would be made an example for the rest of the galaxy. On Earth, the rebuilding had already begun. Zephyrian refugees worked alongside human engineers, their crystal technology merging with human innovation in ways that surprised both species. New ship designs took shape in orbital shipyards, hybrid vessels that combined the best of both civilizations. Valterra often visited the memorial wall in Geneva, where the names of every human who died at Kepler's dawn were inscribed in crystal and steel. Admiral Hahn's name held the place of honor at the center, surrounded by the thousands who had followed him into battle. "They keep asking me why humans did it," she told Dr. Kim during one of their research sessions. "The other species don't understand. They want to know what Earth gained from saving us." Kim looked up from the hybrid neural interface he was calibrating. "What do you tell them?" "That maybe that's the point," Valterra replied. "Maybe the fact that you had nothing to gain is exactly why you were the only ones who tried." The first signs of trouble came 6 months later. Deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures moving toward Earth's region of the galaxy. The readings were unlike anything in the databases, showing power levels that dwarfed entire star systems. Admiral Yoon called an emergency meeting of the Earth Defense Council. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of local space, with red markers indicating the approaching threat. Intelligence estimates put their arrival at 18 months, she reported to the assembled officers and civilians. "Based on energy readings, we're looking at a devourer force that makes Dawn look like a training exercise." Captain Nam Gil, now promoted to admiral after his heroics in the battle, studied the tactical projections. "How many ships are we talking about?" Conservative estimate. 10,000 capital vessels, with support craft numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Yoon's words fell like stones into the silent chamber. "They're not coming to test us this time. They're coming to end us." The room erupted in urgent discussions. Some voices called for evacuation of Earth's colonies, others for desperate diplomatic outreach to the galactic powers. A few suggested surrender, hoping the Devourers might spare humanity if they offered no resistance. Dr. Kim stood up slowly, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. "We all knew this day would come. From the moment we decided to help the we knew there would be consequences." He gestured to the memorial wall, visible through the chamber's windows. "Admiral Han and 20,000 others died because they believed some things are worth fighting for. Even when you can't win. Especially when you can't win. So what do you suggest?" asked Counselor Park Mina. Kim smiled grimly. "We do what humans do best. We learn, we adapt, and we fight. The galaxy is watching to see what we're made of. Let's show them." Outside the chamber windows, Earth's new fleet took shape in orbital shipyards. Human ingenuity merged with alien technology, creating ships unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They would be outnumbered 1,000 to 1 when the Devourers arrived, but humanity had never learned when to quit fighting.